Good morning, everybody. Thank you once again for sharing your Saturday with us. Hello. If you don't remember from last week, my name is Emil Gomez. I am one of the instructors in today's class, doing a little bit something different, of course. More or less had our tax training last week, and this week we're going to show you on how to use a valuable tool at CTA. It's the computer program itself. It's called Tax Slayer. We've used it for about 4 or 5 years. We think it satisfies our needs, and we're going to go through the bulk of today's lecture telling you about this computer program. And of course, you probably see it in front of you right now. So I've accessed it, and I'll walk you through all the steps involved in using this program. A little bit after my presentation, we're going to have another instructor give you tips on the virtual tax return process. Okay, so so if you do see this screen, of course, it is of the tax program itself. Again, Tax Slayer. How do I? Let's do it here. Okay, so sorry. Let's do this. Okay, as you can see here, there are many screens, many little links to navigate, and hopefully you can see what I'm seeing right here. I have logged in to the program. It is here. You see the current username. That's me, Emil G. Everyone who is watching this presentation today, the username to access this program is going to be your CTA email accounts. So I know there are some people, I think I saw that on the chat. Some people said they don't have a CTA email account yet. It will be set up for you. For some people who were with us last year, hopefully you still use your CTA email account. Again, I want to stress the importance of using it, of course, practically speaking, when we talk about access to the Tax Slayer program, but also when we communicate amongst ourselves. As I mentioned last week, we're dealing with a lot of sensitive issues, information from our taxpayers. If we communicate amongst ourselves through the CTA email accounts, which are Gmail accounts, it offers a level of protection. The information that's transmitted between ourselves is protected. It won't be seen by other people, and hopefully other people will not have access to it. Okay, so towards the right of my name on the top there and username. And I guess before I go on, last week we had like a formal outline in terms of some of the stuff we did in taxes. Anyway, we had a formal outline more or less in terms of what we were doing. As you can tell right now, based on this presentation to date, it's very free flowing. I don't have a set outline for you. I think the best thing to do when it comes to having a presentation of this tax program is just to talk about it. You know, kick the tires. Look at the screens themselves. That's more or less what I did when I tried to use this program. I think that's the best way, I believe, in order to teach this course, and hopefully you've gotten something out of this. Of course, after today, a recording of this class will be posted on YouTube a couple of days from now. My understanding is when it came to our tax lecture from last week, that recording is already on YouTube. So if you wanted to do some homework, revisit some topics that were discussed last week, go to YouTube, on the search bar, type in community tax aid, and you'll see it there. Okay. Change tax year. As you can see, I'm on the 2022 tax program, which means based on the screen, you can prepare a 2022 return. And when I talk about a 2022 return or any year return, we talk about being capable of preparing a federal return and every state in the union that has an income tax. We talked about New York, of course, being common because we live in New York. We're going to deal with more or less New York-based taxpayers. But there, again, we talked about people who work in other states, live in other states, even lived in another state, say on the other coast or in the Midwest, and is coming to live in New York. We can do any state return, any state that has an income tax because of the program we have here. Change tax year. As you can see, there's a little drop down. If we had to prepare a return other than 2022, we can do this. We can go as far back based on what you're seeing here, as far back as 2017. Okay, when it comes to tax taxpayers who who might deserve a refund, might qualify for a refund, we can only go back as far as 2019 and prepare that return. If they have a return from a prior year and it has to be done and they're getting a refund, the chances are most likely they won't get that refund because the due date of filing that return has passed. It's very important to deal with when we talk about 2019 returns. Those returns have to get in this year by April 18th, 2023, in order for somebody to get their refund on a 2019 return, right? Of course, we want to follow the other years, but when we deal with this year, if you're dealing with somebody has to file a 2019 return, that's very important to keep in mind. Okay, let's look at the middle screen here. We give you access to the tax program, and you have access to these two screens here. I'm going to point them out with my cursor. One is to start a 2022 return. So in other words, you'll be given information of a taxpayer. You might do it at one of our storefronts. You might do it virtually. How do you prepare a return? You're going to do it here using this screen called Start the 2020 Tax Return. The way I structured this part of the lecture is I'm going to walk you through the screens of a taxpayer I've created, sample taxpayer I've created. But after a little break, sometime this morning, we're going to refer to some materials that you've been given throughout the week, some materials of a taxpayer named Robertson. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. And we will go through this steps from beginning to end and enter that person's information into TaxSlayer. You get an idea of what the return is like once we access this little part of the screen. Client search. What if you've already started a return, prepared the return, and you wanted to know the status of the client, or even wanted to enter additional information about the client? Let's go to this client search and let's see what's there. Okay, so these are all the 2020 returns done to date. As you can see, some of our volunteers are already up and running. They have prepared a lot of returns. Okay, and just scrolling them down again. The returns are listed based on the social, person's name, that person's phone number, the preparer, the status of that return, and then selecting the return. So if you were again to in the midst of preparing somebody's return, you had to enter additional information. You see where the cursor is. You enter the select button, and then you can go into that person's return and enter some more information. I see some people asking questions in the chat or questions raised. Hopefully we have some of our seasoned volunteers answering these questions in the chat. During the break, I'll look at the chat and try to answer some of your questions that way as well. Okay, so let's get out of this, go back to these screens, and just show you some other things that you're seeing towards the top here. Dismiss notifications, that could be a little bit noticed. That's really for us managers, people who are reviewing the return. Talks about the status of certain returns that have perhaps a little bit of an error, that have been rejected in terms of e-filing, and we have to know why it's being rejected for e-filing. We would see a notice here, and once we've responded to the notice, we can dismiss the notice and eliminate it. Message Center is really for our friends at TaxSlayer. They'll give us special notices. We give any TaxSlayer customer, for example, e-filing is now available in New York State. You'll see perhaps a press release that TaxSlayer forwards to anybody who uses their program. So we're grateful for that, of course. Rejected clients is really an issue, once again, for the managers. Once the manager reviews your work and e-files the return, managers are responsible for doing that final step. Then at that point, they're responsible for monitoring the progress of that return. Has that return been accepted by the various federal and state agencies? Has it been accepted for e-filing? In some cases, it might be rejected. And as you can see at this point, one client, and I'm not going to open this button, has been rejected. So the manager in charge of that return, and again, we as managers have the responsibility of looking at that little button there and seeing the returns that we're responsible for, what is the status, and we'll correct whatever errors is pointing up. Apparently one is pointing up as of now. Okay, so we're more or less in the main screen before we go to this screen and this screen. But before we go there, I want to show you what's towards the right of the screen, excuse me, towards the left of the screen here. So again, we're in the main menu section. If I were to click that, guess what? We're back at the main menu. Okay. Client status. We can click this. And again, it's a shortcut to what you saw before in terms of the status of all the returns that have been processed to date or being processed. Textbook online, that's something that's has prepared for us. I'll show what this button is. I don't think we're going to use this. It apparently is a tax website that we can access tax articles. I believe we have to pay a little bit more for that in terms of our subscription. I think based on the access of other materials that we have, we don't need to use this. The IRS website. I gave you a ton of locations last week. But what if you wanted to go on the website, get a question? Well, guess what? Hitting that gives you a link, the irs.gov website, and there it is. So if you had a question specifically and you think going on this screen can help you, by all means, I'll try to give you a specific example of why you would go to this screen a little bit later. Okay. Opting out of e-filing a return. Again, the IRS and New York State mandate that e-file a return, and if for some reason, based on some unusual circumstance, we might have to file a return by paper. And this form 8948 has accompanied it. In other words, the government wants to know, why aren't you e-filing a return, even though you're required to do it? And when I say required to do it, that's really of paid preparers. We're not exactly a paid preparer. We're a not-for-profit organization who prepares returns. So whether or not this form is mandatory is a manager's decision, but I want to show it to you anyway. So why would somebody not file their return electronically? Well, a common explanation, and believe it or not, is what's listed here. Number one, the taxpayer chooses not to file it on paper. I rarely seen that. Most commonly, the reason why we would not file a return electronically, we have to file it on paper when it comes to federal returns, is the issue of identity theft. I think we mentioned this last week. Let's mention it right now, once again. People who are identified identity theft victims have to have what's called an identity theft PIN, a 4-digit number that is given to them every year for the rest of their lives by the Internal Revenue Service. They have been flagged. They have been identified as somebody whose identity has been breached. And in order to protect their identity when it comes to filing a return going forward, the IRS gives them a PIN. Now, prior to this year, I think even last year, all of these PIN numbers, and they varied each year, was given to people via a letter that the IRS would send to the taxpayer. If you've interviewed somebody and they're identified as a person, make sure you ask for this ID PIN number. Now, another way of accessing an identity theft PIN for somebody who is an identity theft victim is to go on the website. And that is a reason why you need to go to the IRS website using this little link here that I'm highlighting right now. Okay, so some people can access their identity theft PIN by going online. Hopefully, they've created an account for themselves. It means doing that. And I even mentioned last week, the sad fact that who are not even identified as identity theft victims can enroll in this program just to get a sense of security that their information is not going to be compromised. They can voluntarily enter this program to get identity theft pins for themselves. Okay. Let us see what's going on. IRS mailing addresses. Once again, if we were to file a paper return, you can access this little link here, which will give you addresses for where to send it based on where the person lives. For example, New York. I'm not going to click the box, but that's what this link does. It takes you again to another part of the IRS website. Google. What if you had to Google something about the zip code of a certain place, or the maybe even research a tax topic and Google it, or maybe even research an issue on New York State in terms of the real property tax credit. I told you about the steps involved in identifying a property as being tax exempt. Maybe if you Google that property, maybe that can answer your question as well. It's another way of trying to answer your questions. You have a link to Google and you can type it in want in the Google bar, as you guys probably know. TaxSlayer Pro, let's see what this is about. Again, this is more or less an advertisement for TaxSlayer. What got us, guys? We don't have to worry about that. Once again, believe it or not, there's another link to Form 8948. It's right there. I'm not going to hit it again. Beyond Trust remote support. So I've used this in the past. Say if there's an issue with the program itself, with the TaxSlayer program, and you have to reach out to representatives at TaxSlayer, and you guys have had work done with your computer, and you need somebody, a tech person from a trusted organization, to come into your computer and access your computer through your computer screens. This support portal that has been set up by TaxSlayer, you might need that in case there's an issue with hardware and accessing and using the program on your computer. Okay. Next, knowledge base. Again, TaxSlayer for all of its customers has various articles about certain tax issues, as you can see here, or how to get help on TaxSlayer's cloud-based support and things like that. You might need to know this. Most likely, the desk support has articles in terms of how to report tax items in TaxSlayer. It's there. Want to use it? Be my guest. What else is here? Another helpful item that TaxSlayer provides is, as you can see, it says here 2020 to 2022 tax year-over-year tax provisions comparison. So they take in various tax topics, and let's do it here. And they tell you what the rules are when it came to the earned income credit 2020, 2021, 2022. I think we tried to do that in our classes, but as you can see, TaxSlayer, as a courtesy to its customers, has summarized those rules as well. So if you think in terms of answering about their income credit, you want to have a year comparison, avail yourselves of this little service that our folks at TaxSlayer has provided for us. Recovery rebate credits, child tax credit, things like that. So again, if you want to, if you think this can help you in terms of all the other, in addition to all the other materials that we've given you, by all means, do go ahead and do so. So we have here. I've used this. I think it's of limited use. It's what's called the refund calculator. Okay. We talked last week about does somebody even have to file a return? Well, this one says, what could this person's anticipated refund be? In other words, you don't have to go through the steps of filing a full-blown return. Maybe somebody wants to know what their refund is on what you know now about the person. So again, this is not necessarily the preparation of a return. It's just a quick scratch sheet, if you will, about some information about the taxpayer. Put in their information, their filing status, age, etc., some of the W-2 information, add this up, and then I'm not going to go through all the screens. You hit next, and then it'll give you an estimated bottom line figure of what that person's refund might be. That's what that's about. Okay, let's get out of this. Let us go back to the main screen. Okay, so I've given you an example about what the main screen for you guys will look like once you've logged on to TaxSlayer. It will look like this. So let's look next at some of the things that you'll need to know in terms of inputting data into TaxSlayer. And in order to do this, I've created a sample client, and we'll use this sample client as a basis of navigating the various screens that you guys are going to come across during the year. So in order to do that, we're going to hit what's called the client search, and we're going to hit the sample client I've created for purposes of this presentation. And guess what? That person's name is, where is it? Joe Sample. Ha ha ha. Very creative, Emil. But anyway, we're going to use Mr. Sample's return as a basis for this part of the lecture. And as you can see, that's Mr. Sample's security number. That's a phone number we've created for him. As you can see, the status of the return is not reviewed. In other words, it doesn't have to be reviewed by somebody. It has not been accepted. In other words, it has not been processed and e-filed. In progress, still has to be, work has to be done on it. Deactivated, a return that has been started and then a decision has been made not to continue. Some cases, a state only, as you can see there. Accepted, review, state only. In other words, that's what the progress is, the part here, the status is, okay? And when we go to our good friend Joe Sample, we know that he's in progress, all right? Hit the tools for you if you like. So talks about scanning documents and client status. Well, we more or less have done that. Let's go to the select button you can see here on the right-hand side. And we're gonna go into Mr. Sample's return, which is in progress, okay? And it's coming up. And there we go. Okay, so if we can see in the upper left-hand corner, this is a 2022 return of our taxpayer, Joe Sample. I showed you the other screens with the other years. So of course, a heads up is, and a prior return on someone, make sure you're not using the 2022 program to enter prior information, okay? As you can see from the right-hand side, we've entered information already about this person, and TaxSlayer automatically calculates the bottom line based on what we've entered so far about this person. For purposes of this presentation, I'm going to change some numbers and enter some numbers, and you're going to see these amounts constantly change. The AGI is going to change based on a new number we're creating or entering. The federal refund, in this case, is a federal refund. Why do I know this? Because the number's listed in green. So as of now, Joe Sample's AGI is 4,000. His federal refund at this point is $40. New York State, apparently he has to pay $53, okay? This is more or less what the federal screen looks like of this person's return. My understanding is based on your permissions, your access to our part of the TaxSlayer program. I don't think you can send this to a state. Of course, we want you to enter everything in the state screens, and we'll show that to you in a minute as thoroughly, as completely as possible. But in terms of you seeing what the bottom line looks like on the state form, similar to this, I don't think you have the capability. But that's okay. That's the responsibility of the manager when he reviews your work, right? So I'm going to move the cursor to the left-hand side, and you can see this part of the screen opens up. Now, you can navigate, move, enter information based on the broad categories. So if you have an income item that you have to put in, go to the federal section, open up, and you see, for example, under the federal section, income. And under income, you see the broad categories of income, all right? All these things you can enter, all right? I want to go back out. Let's do that if I can. Okay, another way, another shortcut of entering information, as you can see, other than using that federal section screen, is enter form number. So for example, if you wanted to enter someone's self-employment income and you wanted to do it this way, SCHEGULEC, right? Enter a Schedule C on this person because he has a profit or loss from a business. This is another way of navigating that screen. You can type in the form itself. As you can see, I'm clicking it off. And guess what? You go directly to the Schedule C screen and enter the information on the Schedule C. So these are a couple of ways of navigating TaxSlayer in terms of entering information when it comes to, say, income or expenses, or even let's use it again. Say let's try this one. 1099R, right? Remember what 1099R is? Pension distributions, okay? So we have his pension distribution amount, and guess what? By entering the form number, you come to The pension distribution screens. This is what it looks like. This is again, so to enter this information, I'll show you it what I call the conventional way through what's called these income screens. One thing again, as long as we're here to highlight, make sure you enter again this uh, 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 distribution code that's on box 7. Very important when you look at a 1099-R form because it tells you the taxability, tax treatment of that distribution. Okay, let's go back again now. The screen, it's a little bit slow here, but we get it done. Okay, so we're back again to our main screen, the tax summary, and let us now go to the other sections of the right-hand side here. For example, basic information. Okay, so as you notice, based on the basic information screen, now that we're looking at the main part, the middle part of the screen, you notice some boxes are in black and some boxes that are not in black. Well, what does that mean? Well, generally speaking, if something's entering black, see a black box, that means there is information within that box, right? So let's hit this. Let's edit it. So I personally previously created the fact that this person of ours, Mr. Joe Sample, is a single person. Okay? So again, if you happen to know down the road that, oh, by the way, Joe was married or Joe's spouse recently passed, have to change the filing status. Okay, you would do that here. What else? Jesus, get all the way back here. I'm so sorry. Oops. Okay, so that's a basic information screen. Go back to it one more time. Again, there's personal information there. Let's look at it. Personal information about Joe, his social security number, his date of birth, his occupation. Very important. In this case, Joe can be claimed as a dependent on someone else. So if you guys remember from last year, his standard deduction amount is limited. It is not the basic standard deduction amount for a single person. He can be claimed as a dependent on someone else's return, which means that he's disqualified from perhaps qualifying for certain credits like the earned income credit. Okay. And we do know, based on this little tick box here, he's over 18 and he's a student. So apparently, a little bit more we're learning about Joe is he was a student who perhaps had a summer job and received that income amount. Let's find out a little bit later. Okay. More information about Joe, where he lived, et cetera, phone number, an email account. Make sure you ask people. One issue that came up during the week from one of our managers, it's like before we e-file a return, we do need to put in an email address in a certain space. I haven't done this for purposes of this presentation, but it is important to put an email address here. I didn't do it here, but again, it's just a little example for us guys, okay? All right, let's go back. And other things we see under the basic information part, we see dependents and the qualifying persons here that you can enter here. If Joe was not a student and not being claimed as somebody else, maybe he has dependents. You would put that information here. We're not going to put it here. We'll probably use that information or enter information in our second class problem, which is going to be after a break. Joe could be an identity theft victim. You put information about his identity theft pin here. Okay, I'm not going to do that for you here, but that's where you would put it right there. Okay, so those are the things, those are like sub-screen within the basic information screen. Go next to the federal section screen. And the federal section screen has broad categories such as income, deductions, other taxes, the payments and estimates, miscellaneous forms. Okay, so with the income section, as you can hear, we do have something already listed, a W-2. And once again, you can see for the boxes, apparently the only information here in terms of Joe's income is his W-2. That is listed in black. If Joe, again, had state refund that perhaps was taxable in the prior year, we would enter it here. If Joe had a bank account, we would enter the information here. 1099, if you were retired, enter it here. I haven't seen this in a while in my travels in the tax aid. Qualified retirement plan distribution for disasters, unemployment, other miscellaneous income. 1099 NEC, which is for Schedule C individuals. Information entered here in 1099 NEC can be linked to Schedule C. Those two are really work in tandem when it comes to 1099 NEC forms. 1099K forms are for, once again, Schedule C self-employed individuals who receive credit card deposits for their work. You usually see this in the case of Uber drivers and perhaps the Amazon delivery workers too. This form works in tandem with Schedule C as well. There'll be a link to say, is this form, the information entered in this form or this form, should it be linked to a Schedule C? Which Schedule C? You can prepare, of course, more than one Schedule C. Schedule E has to do with farmers, Schedule D, capital gain transactions. Again, you're getting that information for Schedule D from the 1099 B forms. And again, and we usually see this in the case of retired individuals. They'll have a brokerage account that lists a ton of their transactions, and you would enter it here. Schedule F is for farming people. Not too many farms in New York State. I don't think I've seen that here. Alimony, if it's taxable, we would enter the information here. Any other income, if somebody had a K1, that is a summary from a fiduciary, such as a partnership or a trust, we see that rarely. If you do see that in your travels, reach out to a manager. They'll help you navigate that screen and interpret the information on a K1. Gambling winnings, we talked about our gamblers who perhaps won the Kentucky Derby or hit big on a slot machine at a casino. They'll probably get a form. We'll enter the gambling winnings there. Cancellation of debt is an involved topic too. And again, if you have somebody, I believe it's a 1099C, something like that, cancellation debt, there's a special treatment of debt. And in some cases, the cancellation of debt may be taxable or may not be taxable based on the person's circumstances. Okay, you would enter the information there. These things, again, are unusual in nature to us here at Community Tax Aid. So reach out to a manager and they'll help you navigate the entering of that type of information. Okay. Let's go back to the W-2. Again, a common screen that you'll probably know about and deal with here. Let's go and see what's in there on Joe's sample. Okay. Okay, so far, it says here that Joe had a job from a company that's called Sam's Swimming Pools. Sounds like Joe was a lifeguard during the summer months and had that amount of his. Again, you can edit what you've entered if you've entered things incorrectly. You can delete what was entered and start all over. You can even add another W-2 if perhaps Joe came back to you next week and said, "Oh, I forgot to give you this second W-2." All right. Let's see what the W-2 looks like. So we're going to go edit. I'm going to hit the pencil icon there. And let's navigate the screens. Again, they're asking information about the employee, and that's more or less carried forward from the main screens. It talks about the information on the person's employer. You're going to get that from the W-2 itself. Again, you see some of these references, for example, B and C, and even these line numbers here. They are references to the W-2 itself, okay? So it's essentially a copy job, taking the information from the W-2 and entering it here. Of course, make sure you're entering it correctly. Make sure that EIN number, the identification number of the business is correct. The name of the business is correct, etc. So according to this, based on the person's W-2, Joe had this amount in wages, that amount in withholdings. And Social Security withheld, Medicare tax withheld. A question we get from taxpayers, and you guys probably know this. Well, when I file a return, I'm going to get a refund, most likely of the tax withheld. When do I get a refund of Social Security and Medicare? Well, that doesn't happen right now. That is more or less the person's contributions, this number on box 4, to their Social Security fund. When their Social Security fund at the time they retire, build up that retirement fund in effect for themselves that's provided by the government should be there for them. Medicare is their contribution to the Medicare premiums or Medicare fund that helps us all in terms of Medicare benefits. Let's see, nothing else in box 14 or box 12. There could have been, right? For example, let's look at box 12. You might see these code letters, for example, DD, I believe is the value of health insurance benefits that an employer gives somebody. Some of the other letters, I believe it's C and D, refer to contributions to retirement plans. And that's very important because that information there might carry over to the retirement contribution credit, the savers credit, I believe Tom had mentioned last week. So make sure that you do not neglect the information in the box 12 of a W-2, because that some of that information flows through to other forms, and it could mean some credits, most likely of a non-refundable nature, that can help somebody lower their tax bill. Box 14 has important information. As you can see, it varies by the state, but let's highlight the New York amounts. And guess what? See what I'm highlighting right now? IRC 125, the cafeteria contribution. 414H for municipal workers, their contributions to their New York City retirement or state retirement plan. That's very important because we talked about the New York additions when we deal with a New York return. We take the federal numbers, and these amounts have been deducted in coming up with a federal taxable income. It has to be added back to New York State. So make sure you're entering the information here, you're coding it properly, and then you put in the right number in box 14, which is somewhere around there. Anyway, somewhere there. Because again, that number carried forwards to the state return as a proper New York State addition. Very important. Okay, and this is the New York State information that flows through to the New York State return, the IT 201. Make sure you put in the right locality name, right? Those are the withholdings. But apparently the withholdings on these wages are not enough to cover the anticipated New York tax bill, because as of now, there's an amount due of $53. Okay, let me show you an example of how the numbers change if we were to change some of the numbers here. What if you, Joe said, or you looked at the W-2 as you're reviewing your work and you said, gee whiz, I put in 4,000, the W-2 says 4,400. I better change that. 40, whoops, let's try it this way. 44, can I do it? Let's do it this way. 4,400. 4,400. 4,400. Okay, I made a mistake. I first entered $44,000 and I put hold on one second. And you guys can do this if you want as a check in terms of the Social Security tax withheld. For example, the box 4 amount on most W-2s is 6.2% of the amount in box 3. So 6.2% of 4,400 is $272.80. That's there. Guess what? TaxSlate is automatically calculating this. So in other words, check the amounts in boxes 4 and 6 compared to the W-2. Make sure it's more or less in the ballpark. It could be off by $1 or $2. Okay. And this mine, I'm changing the amount of the W-2 to 4,400. Okay. And do that. Continue. Look, so what happens, guys? It's gonna happen. Let's do this. It did change, right? Look at the right-hand side now. Your AGI went up by $400 to now 4,400. Okay, it automatically makes the changes as you go along. And as you can see, the refund, I believe, was like 48 or in the area like $50. Well, it's now down to 40. So again, TaxSlayer is automatically calculating for you this for you down the road as you make changes. So keep looking at this if you like, and you get an idea of what the person's bottom line is. Okay. One of the things you can do as preparers at your part of the way is you have an idea of what the bottom line is. I would suggest you not quote that number to a taxpayer. Taxpayer, of course, is interested finding out what the bottom line is. You can always say, "I'm still working on the return. The return has to be reviewed by the manager. Once the manager reviews it, he'll have a better idea of what your refund or what you have to pay is." Why do we do that? It makes sense. What if you told this person, these are your numbers, and based on the manager's review, it's a different number? We could have a discordant taxpayer. We don't want that. But anyway, so we saw the federal return, federal refund changing, going lower, but we also saw New York State payment due increasing. It's now gone up because of our little change. Okay, so I'm going to go back there and I'm going to revert the numbers to where they were at the start. 4,000, 4,000, 4,000. And as you can see, again, TaxSlayer is automatically calculating what's in boxes 4 and 6. It is straight calculations. This number is 6.2% of this number. This number is 1.45% of this number. Again, TaxSlayer is automatically calculating. Once again, compare these numbers to what the W-2 says. And if there's a substantial difference, let us know. Okay. Once again, let's put it back at 4,000. And let's do this and continue. And again, it's back to the way it was, right? Oh, it didn't change. Again, the 40 didn't change at all, but this did change. All right. But anyway, it is important, of course, to put the right numbers. And as you can see, we can enter more than one W-2 by clicking this box. I'm not going to do that. And that is important because people have more than one job. We know some people who have several jobs. You're going to see several W-2s, and they're going to give you a lot of papers. There's going to be a big paper trail on this. Again, make sure when you're entering the information, it is of the 2022 tax year. Separate them. Really look at the W-2s. Make sure you have the correct date. Okay. There's another thing, too, you need to know as well, and that has to do with the employer. Okay. Sammy's Swimming Pools. What if Joe says, "Oh, those great guys at Community Tax Aid prepared my return," and he tells a coworker who worked at Sammy's Swimming Pools, "Hey, you guys, I'm going to recommend Community Tax Aid. Go to Community Tax Aid, and they'll prepare your return." So maybe Joe's friend, who also worked at Sammy's Swimming Pools, brings his W-2. Well, the information about Sammy's Swimming Pools is already stored in the computer. In other words, let me see if I can try to call this up for you. Let's try to do it this way. Yeah. So again, when we enter the employee identification number of another W-2 and it happens to be of that same employer, I'm not going to do it here. We put the EIN of Sammy's Swimming Pools. The information about Sammy's Swimming Pools will automatically come up here. In other words, TaxSlayer is storing this information, and that's going to be a big time saver for people who work at the same agency, same city agency, the same employer. You don't have to enter that information. In effect, half of your job is done. Okay, so that's what a W-2 looks like. Let us go to the income side. And again, just again, quickly, other income amounts you can put in. Now to deductions. The deduction screen within the federal section. And again, we talked about adjustments to get ADI, and it says here, begin. What do we have here? Something in black. Sounds like we have something there. Medical savings account, I'm surprised that's highlighted. Again, the person had a medical savings account, enter the information here. If Joe was an educator, we talked about the rules for educator, put in the educator expenses there. All the things we saw last week in that particular side for adjustments for AGI are listed, are summarized right here. Okay, self-employed, insurance deduction, early withdrawal penalties on a bank account and CD, alimony paid, if it's alimony income on one side, the amount payment is the deduction. Person has an IRA, a regular IRA as opposed to a Roth. I don't know if it was brought up last week. I was thinking about this on the way over here today. I think it's important to know. And it did happen once at the community tax aid. Somebody whose return we prepared showed a tax due. And this person came to us and said, is there something we can do to lower that tax payment? And this person was aware of IRAs and how prevalent and common they were at the time. Well, when it comes to regular IRAs, the rules on the regular IRA state that you can set up a regular IRA by the due date of your 2022 return. In other words, April 18th. If you make a contribution to the regular IRA by that date, it can be a contribution on your 2020 tax return. Now, that's a very good bit of like tax planning advice for some people. It might not fit everybody's tax situation. I think it's good to know and good for you to know. And you never know, maybe somebody will talk about an IRA, talk about how do I lower this bottom line? Well, that's something you can suggest to the person. Okay. Student loan interest, other adjustments are entered there. Let us go back. Or let's do it this way. Let's hit other taxes. Self-employment tax, again, that's more or less a automatic calculation. We talked about somebody who receives tips that has not been reported on a W-2, or a barber who receives cash tips, a cab driver receives cash tips. There is somebody whose return we prepared who is a delivery person for one of these large companies. He receives credit card tips, and they're reported on his W-2 because they're linked with the credit card payments that customer makes. But that person also receives cash tips, which is not reported on his W-2. That person has to pay Social Security tax on his unreported tip income. Some other things, tax on early withdrawal penalty from a pension plan. You might see a number there. What else? That's more or less, again, the common ones you'll see at the estimates. Again, somebody who is self-employed and a sophisticated taxpayer who knows that he or she is responsible for making estimated tax payments to pay their tax bill because their source of income is what they do. Nobody else can pay the taxes. They are responsible for that. So they can make estimated tax payments and enter them here. The same is true of state returns, maybe other withholdings that are coming from other sources. You might see this in the instance of withholdings on unemployment compensation that more or less should be reported on the unemployment screen, but there might be federal withholdings coming from other sources that are not listed or cannot be entered on other screens. You might have to enter it here. Okay. Estimated tax payments, a penalty for underestimating your taxes. There's ways of making that amount lower. It's based on perhaps the amount of tax a person had paid in the prior year. Just a straight calculation. In other words, if you know the information about that, it can lower his penalty for not paying his estimated taxes on time. You have to enter information there a little bit. If the return was to go on an extension, we would have to fill out what's called a 4868 towards the end of the tax season. If necessary, we'll prepare this form for individuals. I will tell you this, the majority of our taxpayers are most likely will be getting refunds. So if it's towards the end of the tax season and the person you know is going to get a refund, it is not really necessary to file an extension because they will not be penalized for not filing an extension because they're going to get a refund. Some people do that anyway just to cover themselves. You should file an extension if you believe towards the end of the tax season that that person owes. An extension of an extension with 4868 just extends the time period of filing return. It does not extend the time for paying the tax. So any taxes due on returns that you know have amounts due have to be paid on April 18th. Okay? Filing an extension, once again, does not extend the time for paying that amount. That person will be penalized even though they filed an extension of time. Okay? What else? Miscellaneous forms. Unusual forms that you might have to fill out. Well, once again, here we go again. 4868 is listed here. 1310 is for the deceased taxpayer. You might be filing a return for somebody's father who passed away. They're required to file a final return based on income they might have earned in 2022, and then he passed away in 2022. You might have to file this form to claim a refund to someone other than the taxpayer, that taxpayer's representative. An installment agreement, if somebody knows that they have to pay taxes, they can make an arrangement with the IRS to pay it off a little bit at a time. That is a request. Not necessarily it'll be accepted by the IRS, it's a request. Pay off my this way. Identification PIN, and again, as needed. Again, you can put the identification PIN apparently here as well. Some people don't have an ITIN and you just need that. It's usually alien taxpayers who have United States source income. They'll need an ITIN just to file a return, as you can see. 2848 is a power of attorney that we might need to represent a taxpayer as of now and perhaps future correspondence with government agencies. Okay, any notes right there, things like that. We talked about the 8938 as part of the FACA and FinCEN rules. You can access that form and write information about foreign assets the person might have control of. Okay, disclosure form. Let's go down here, health insurance. Okay, again, when we talk about the responsibilities of knowing the person's health insurance and how we got it, this is really it right now. We need to know, and again, it still happens for people who receive their health insurance through what's called the exchange, a state agency set up in New York. Most states have this, where they give taxpayers a little bit of a break of some help in providing healthcare insurance because they need it, because they want to maintain their health and they want to make sure they have access to doctors and they have health insurance. This is one of the ways of getting that, through what's called applying for health insurance coverage to the exchange. People who do that will receive what's called the 1095A form. And again, the information on that form will have perhaps an advance payment premium tax credit. We talked about that last week, or the premiums that they paid, and perhaps they might even be entitled to a premium tax credit that they have to, that helps them, or a premium tax credit that was overpaid throughout the year and they have to pay it back. So we would enter yes or no whether or not they're covered or they have coverage through the exchange. And then we'd have to enter information on a 1095 that this person has. Again, if that person doesn't have it that week, make sure they come back the next week with that form. It is that important. State section. Okay, so for Joe Sample, we have entered information on his residence state, which of course in this case is New York. We can delete New York if we put in the wrong state. We can edit the information that we put in there. Let's see what we have on Joe Sample here. Okay, loading the New York return. You will see these questions all the time when you file out New York. Even though I've answered this once before, that question say, was the taxpayer or spouse at any time of the year a resident in New York City or Yonkers, or non-resident with earnings in New York City or Yonkers? Well, in this case, for this example, this person is a resident of New York City. We're going to tick off yes. Was he a full resident of Yonkers? No. Was he a full resident of New York City? Yes. If he was, how many months did he live in New York City? Very important, because he'll be subject to the resident rates. And then also, if you remember, the New York City school tax credit, he'll be entitled to the full benefit of the New York City school tax. But in this case, it's not going to happen to Joe. Why? Because Joe is a dependent of another person. And we know that that's one of two criteria. In this case, he doesn't meet that test. He will not qualify for the New York City school tax credit. Okay, maybe that's one of the reasons why this person has to pay, because he's not getting that valuable credit that could have knocked this out. Okay, what else do we have here? Okay, let's see anything else here. That's what we're talking about at the moment. Let's try to hit continue. Let's see what happens there. Takes us back there. Okay. What do we do? Summary print. That's sure. Buttons okay. Do this. Okay. Let's go to summary print. So you're at a point now, ladies and gentlemen, where you believe you've entered everything on the person, everything correctly. Let's go to summary, and we're on we're not. Let's go. I'm sorry. Yeah, summary again will show you again only on the federal side apparently for you guys what the return looks like based on what you've entered. You can always again double check that the person's name, social security number. You can check it to the source documents. You can check it to our checklist. All right. So apparently that's the power you have based on since we grant you in TaxSlayer. Okay. Let us go to e-file. And again, you guys at this point cannot e-file the return. That's for the manager to do once he reviews your work. But let's go to the e-file section. You enter information about the taxpayer. You believe, based on this number, that he wants to e-file a return and get a refund. How would he like his refund? He would like it as a paper check or direct deposit, et cetera, et cetera. He would even opt for a paper return. Okay. How do we know what to do? What box do we check here? Well, again, that should be listed in page 1 of our checklist towards the bottom right-hand corner. You'd have indicated wants a refund, if any, sent to him as a paper check. Okay. How about the payment? How does he want his payment done? Well, in this case, he's going to mail the payment, which means that when we prepare the return and prepare a paper copy for Joe, he's going to get an additional piece of paper, a voucher that he's going to have to take. We'll instruct him about the voucher, and the payment. I didn't list it here. You put Joe's email address. TaxSlayer wants that. The government wants that in order to process the authorization forms. Okay. I think that's all you need to see on this screen. As you can see, we can also to file return. So during the tax season, and I'm not going to tick it off here. During the tax season, somebody comes to us like the first or second week and says, I really want my refund. Here's the information that I have for you. Prepare my return, and we prepare it. And then 3 or 4 or 5 weeks down the road passes. And the taxpayer says, oh my God, I forgot to give you this. I forgot to tell you I was on unemployment. I finally got the unemployment form. Well, we have to change, amend something we've already done. We would do it through this screen here. I'm not going to show it to you right now. If it happens, we have the power to amend the return that's already been done through the screen. Okay. So I think that's it right now in terms of a broad introduction to the TaxSlayer program. I showed you some of the screens. I showed you some of the ways of entering information, even doing the form numbers, the federal section, how to change information, the saving of certain tax information, for example, W-2s. That is also true of like 1099-A information, distribution information from, say, a retirement plan or a brokerage who are fiduciaries of retirement plans, like Fidelity is a big fiduciary who monitors retirement plans. So somebody could receive pension distribution that is controlled by their employer, but is monitored by Fidelity as their fiduciary. So whatever that information is on Fidelity, its address, its EIN, may be similar or may be the same to another 1099 that you'll see. So my point is that information similar to W-2 information is stored, and then again, you can access it very quickly when you enter the proper EIN. And again, it'll be a time saver. All right. So that more or less is the first part of the computer course. Hopefully you've taken notes. And again, the structure is free flowing and open. It is 10:03. Let's take a 10-minute break. No, a 15-minute break to say 10:15. How's that, guys? Then I'll set up the next part of the class where we're going to do a return from beginning to end based on the information I gave you last week. Hopefully you have access to. So enjoy your break. We'll be back at 10:15. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So, a lot of people said this in the chat. They didn't have access to the materials and things like that. Links or instructions to get to the materials. Again, it's a folder within the shared folders from last week, and hopefully you guys have it, and hopefully you're going to have access to it because we're going to need to see it for this part of the lecture. Let us go here. Okay. Oh, well, that's not it. Sorry. Uh, yeah, this one. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, so this is the information, not much information on our taxpayer whose return we're going to prepare. Okay, we know her name is April Robinson. She's the secretary, and that's her social, date of birth, New York State driver's license, and a special code that's on the driver's license. We need to enter that, and I think I'll show you that when we enter this return. Again, any information on a driver's license or an ID card from New York, that is, it's probably on both sides of the card. Make sure you make a copy or note the information that can be found on both sides of the card. April's daughter is May. We have 2 months here. May, here's some information on the daughter, May, and that's her social and that's her date of birth. They live at 693 Stone Avenue in Brooklyn. So in addition to this summary screen, we have a W-2 for this person and a 1099 for this person. Do you see the 1099? Can somebody in the chat tell me if you see the 1099? Excuse me, the W-2 for this person? Somebody in the chat, let me know. You guys see a W-2 right now on April Robertson? Tom, anybody? Homer? Great, thank you. Okay, I'm learning. So April gave us this. W, the secretary, apparently she works as a lawyer in Madison Avenue. And that's her W-2 information. And what else did she give us? It looks like she also gave us a 1099 for bank account interest. Does everybody see the 1099 that's on the screen now? Somebody in the chat, let me know. Do you see the 1099 interest form? Great, thank you so much. I'm learning, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, take a look at both documents. Does somebody see something unusual when they look at the both documents? Answer in the chat, please. Tell me what you see that you might think is unusual in the documents. Give anybody a slice of virtual pizza if they can answer this. The address changed. That's right. And somebody wrote for calendar year 2021. That's right. So you guys have got it. So I owe a lot of virtual pizza to a lot of people out there. That's right. So apparently Jerry doesn't keep good records on his W-2 shows that she lives in 23rd Street. Maybe that's an old address. So it's just a matter of us informing April to let Jerry, her boss, know that she should correct the address on the W-2. Is that a make or break? Does that affect her significantly in terms of filing a return? Not really. It's really a numbers grab. We want to make sure her social security number agrees, the EIN for Jerry agrees, and they do. That's not the main issue. So we can still file a return without any significant ramifications to April. But you guys are all smart too, and you picked up the fact that when it comes to her 1099 interest form from her bank account, the address is listed correctly, but the date is not. Look where the cursor is. This is a 1099 interest form for her 2021 tax year. So in other words, April, in this case, we can surmise, she gave us use this interest income amount on her 2022 return. What do you say in the chat, guys? Answer that quick question for me. Do we use the information on this 1099 interest form on her 2022 return? Yes or no, guys? Very good. The answer is no, right? Remember what we said last week, a complete and accurate return. We cannot mix the years and try to prepare a 2022 return based on prior year information. Maybe there was income in this, it was just income in this account. Okay, so for purposes of this little example of ours, April finally gave us the 2022 1099 interest form. I don't have it in front of you. For your notes, just write a little note to yourself. That number is $48. Okay, $48. All right. Now, if you remember from this information here, what do we need here? We're going to more or less, in effect, interview this person. So, in other words, for people who have access to this sheet and these documents throughout the week, hopefully you've had a chance to look at this. And I'll look at the chat once again. What are some of the questions we need to know about April and her tax situation in order to complete the return? So, write some things in the chat and I'll look at it. Okay. Do we have enough information right now to complete her return? I don't think so. We need to know a lot more about her. Can someone else claim May? Very good question. Is she single or married? Other income. Ferdina said that. Anita said that. Hello, Anita. I think it's that you from last year. Welcome back. So good. So in other words, you guys are being good tax preparers. You have to interview the person. You are asking questions that are not necessarily in the summary. That's part of what we do here. We have to interview the person, ask questions about that. Yeah, and you're welcome. We need to do the checklist. Very good, Jessica. We are going to do it. Well, let's put it this way. I'm going to show you what the checklist looks like. Let's talk about first whether or not she has other sources of income. So for purposes of our little example, other than the bank account and the W-2, nothing else, okay? So again, just for simplicity's sake, in terms of what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to accomplish, I'll give you a broad introduction to tax layer. Let's say that's her only sources of income, okay? Is someone else claiming May? That's an important thing, okay? He asked April. We need to know a little bit about April. Somebody else brought it up, single or married. So I'm going to make believe on April. I'm going to try to answer your questions, okay? And I'm also going to look at the chat. Somebody wrote, not every question may apply to every taxpayer, but we are required to go through the checklist. That is correct. Need to do the checklist. That is correct. Very important to use the checklist. But again, don't use it as rotes. Questions to know responses, ask them in such a way it's kind of open-ended that you get perhaps an elaborate answer from somebody that might need follow-up. So that means you have to be a good listener, listen to what the taxpayer is saying and follow up on what's being said to you. All right, so when it comes to whether or not somebody other than April can we need the question is there a father around? What about April's father? Don't you think that's important to ask? So let's talk about the father. You ask April, where is May? Where is May's dad? Where is your husband? And April tells you he's gone. He says it like that. What's a follow-up question that you guys might ask? Write something in the chat and I'll look at it. So April just told you that, yeah. Which year is he alive? Oh, that's important too. Okay, I'm Zoa. The person is still alive. April's husband's still alive for purposes of the example. When did he go? Very good. Now, Cassie, are you divorced? What year? Again, very good questions. And again, you guys are really, did he pay alimony? Again, Dean, that were you legally married for alimony? Great. Okay, so let me try to answer your question this way. I'm still married to my husband. I believe, let's see. His name is Randy. So my husband's name is Randy, and Randy ran out on us. Apparently Randy was Randy, and he left us. Okay, so based on what I just said, what will be your follow-up question? They're married, but Randy left her. How long is he missing? Good question, Anita. So Randy left me around May of 2022. That's right, Joseph. What date? And I just answered your question. So what do you know about dates and people who are married but not necessarily together? What do you know about that stuff? 6 months, okay. Filing status, I see that too. Okay. Well, let's talk about filing status. Let's try to focus in on that. Based on what we know right now, and that could change, what do you think this person's filing status is as of now? Okay, somebody said their status is noted as to 1231. Very good point, Marilyn. So in other words, but at the end of the year, still gone, right? I'll say on April's behalf that Randy is still gone. He's still being Randy, apparently. Anita is talking about head of household rules. Maybe that's something we should focus on. But before we really delve into that topic, based on what you know about April that I've told you that you see here, can April be a single taxpayer? Yes or no? Let's see the chat. Okay, I see two no's. They said married by filing separately, possibly. No, 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 no. Let's talk about married filing separately. Somebody brought that up. We know that that filing status is pretty bad, right? Person doesn't qualify for certain tax credits. Tax rates are even higher. That is a possible filing status, right? That is true. Somebody wrote maybe, okay, being open and diplomatic. And in terms of, again, filing status, what do we know about the head of household rules? We know separate. We know Randy is still alive, so this person can be a widower, qualified widower. What do we, and most likely not filing jointly. Apparently, April has said that I don't know where Randy is. He's been gone out of our lives. What do we have to? What do we know about the head of household rules? What do we have to know in order perhaps to claim this person as head of household? What do you guys say in the chat? I'll give you a clue. Well, Carla, the person's not married. Has he taken care of the daughter all year? All right. Does he have any children, dependent? Did May live with her? May did live with her for the whole year. Does he have a dependent? Pay most of rent. So in other words, you guys are really focusing in on the rules for. But what I'll give you this phrase: abandoned spouse, right? Is well, she Anita wrote she is an abandoned spouse, but what about the abandoned spouse rules? In other words, somebody's married but can be considered unmarried and perhaps meet these rules. So Phil wrote, have a qualifying relative or child that live with the taxpayer for the whole year. Very good, Phil. I believe it's at least half of the year, but that's okay. For purposes of head of household, right? Abandoned for more than 6 months. Very good. Is it Fanta? Fanta, that's right. So it sounds like you guys are really focusing in based on your understanding of the head of household rules and the abandoned spouse rules. So for married taxpayers who are separated from their spouses, most likely will not file with their spouses, has a child with them, live with them for at least half of the year. What else do we need to know about in terms of the cost? About the cost of has Randy paid any household costs to take care of May? Has somebody other than the taxpayer provided support costs? Did May have any support that she claims on her own? We talked about Social Security in May's name. Did May provide more than one half of our own support? The answer is we'll say no for purposes of what we're doing here. So I think, in order to really give a conclusion on filing status, which is important because of all those great tax attributes, we can safely say, based on what we're seeing, what we're talking about, responses to the questions, you guys notes that I'm seeing in the chat. Excuse me, April is the head of household, and she has made her daughter being disqualifying person for the head of household rule. That's great. So give you guys a gold star for what you guys just came up with. Okay. I think the next thing to do, since we more or less, quote unquote, have done the checklist, is to show you what the checklist looks like. And let me see if I can get that for you. Where is it? Hold on, guys. I'm going to do this for you. I promise, I promise, I promise. Okay. Uh, okay. I see. Hopefully you see the checklist. Can you tell me in the chat whether or not you see the checklist in the screen? The checklist filled out for April Robertson. Great. I'm learning, Tom. Thank you. All that hard work has paid up. Great. Thank you so much, guys. Good. We have prepared all of here. And as you can see, I'm expanding it so you guys get a better idea what it looks like. And as you can see, using the fill-in version of this checklist that Tom has so diligently prepared for us, and I thank you, Tom, for that, we can enter the information by simply typing it in. So you can have your computer in front of you, type in the information about this person as we speak, and let's review the checklist before we enter April's information in the computer, okay? So we know, based on some of the facts I've already given you, who the taxpayer is, see where the cursor is, person's social security number, the date of birth, person is not born prior to that date. Again, it says storefront. This is a training class. I put training class there. If you happen to work at one of our storefronts, be it Fountain House or the place in Brooklyn or the place in Queens and Corona, or even what's called virtually, I think you should write that type of storefront here. That will help us try to track and find the returns once they're stored on the cloud. We're doing this today, the 4th of February. Taxpayer's occupation. Have we verified their ID? So we tick it in off here. I ticked it off. You see it there. It's kind of small, but it is there. And how do we verify their ID? We take their photo, and especially guys want to do for people whose returns we're preparing for the first time, right? We want to make sure that this person has not used someone else's identity to prepare a return for that person's benefit, for his or her benefit, by using somebody else's identity. Very important in this day and age of identity theft. Person's the secretary. That's where the person lives in Brooklyn and Stone Avenue. Person, the same address. You can see there. Hopefully, let's do it this way. Did someone other than the taxpayer bring in the information? In this case, no. Again, that's important because what if somebody's preparing mother of a taxpayer? Excuse me, the person is the son of the taxpayer, and unfortunately, the taxpayer, the person's mother, cannot be there to prepare the return. Hopefully, that person has enough information to answer questions on the mother's behalf. So it's important to make sure who we're talking to. So if somebody other than the taxpayer brought in the information, this is tick off yes, and into that person's name and what relationship that person has to the taxpayer. Okay, who lives in the home with the taxpayer with April? Well, her daughter May. Here's some information on May. That's her social security number. That is her date of birth. She is April's daughter. May, in this case, has no income. Live with the taxpayer, in this case, for the whole year. As of the end of 2022, May is 10 years old. She goes to school. And in this case, she is a qualifying child of of April. Now, as you can see, we've ticked off a box here, but this tick off of the box, and you see where the cursor is a result of what's being entered in page 3. So let's go to page 3. So again, in terms of test of dependency and whether or not somebody's a qualifying child, we put the information here in worksheet A, which is found on page 3 of a checklist, okay? What does it say here towards the top? Did the taxpayer pay over 50% of the household expenses of someone outside of the taxpayer's household? In this case, the answer is no. But we're asking this in the case of, say, April's parents. Again, might not live with the taxpayer, may qualify as a qualifying relative. Remember those rules, guys? That person, qualifying relatives, need not live with the taxpayer. But then there's all, of course, one of the other tests of qualifying relatives, right? That's why we're asking this question here. Okay. In this case, this person has a dependent about May, but what if you're dealing with a single person, like our Joe Sample person in the first part of our lecture? If you're dealing with Joe Sample and Joe Sample has no dependents, you can just tick off this box here that I'm highlighting. You don't have to fill out the rest of this part of the checklist regarding our first taxpayer, Joe Sample. Okay. Listing possible qualifying children, in this case, May Robertson, which is April Robertson's daughter. And it's hard to tell, and I thought I did this, but I'm going to do it right now for you. Okay. You see what I'm doing, guys? And this is what you should be doing when you interview a taxpayer in this part of the checklist. You go through the various rules that we talked about last week about qualifying children, qualifying relative. Does May meet the age rule, the home rule, the citizenship and residency rule, joint return relationship, report of self, qualifying child of another taxpayer? Remember all the rules we talked about last week? If May is meeting these tests, and you know this because we talked about it last week, you tick off these boxes. Tick the box if the test is met, as you see. Look what it says all here. All the tests must be met in order to claim the dependency. So in other words, whoever's listed here on the qualifying child side, whoever's listed here on the qualifying relative side, has to meet all of these rules. All of these boxes have to be checked in order for the person listed here or here to be claimed as either a QC or QR. Remember those terms? All right. So May, based on our understanding of the test, meets all the tests. So May, we can safely say, is a qualifying child of April. And we know that's important in terms of the great tax attributes that that April apparently is going to get. That's why this box is ticked off here. Okay. So you see the relationship between one page and the other. In some cases, in order to complete this part of the checklist, you have to go to another part of the checklist. Let's keep going. What is at the end of 2022, the taxpayer April is living in power from the spouse, at least since June 30th, at least the last 6 months of the year. That's important to know, right? Or even the whole year. Not legally separated, not divorced, not currently married. Well, currently married, yes, but this is important too. And single. Well, she is married. Okay. So filing status. Based on the conversation we just had amongst ourselves, the facts we know about April, your understanding of the rules of head of household, it says, what is the filing status of this person? It says here head of household or HOAs. We take off that box, and it also says explained. What do we mean by explained when it comes to community taxing? Well, this filing status, and even married filing separate, is an unusual filing status. Why have you determined that this is the case? We want you to flesh out, to explain how you came to that conclusion when it comes to this filing status and this filing status, because again, it's kind of murky. You had to wade through certain rules. Please explain how you came up with this conclusion in terms of the filing status. To the note to this checklist, I'm going to show you the note that I wrote that back up to what I just said about the filing status. Well, what does it say here on the right-hand side of page 6? The taxpayer is separated from the spouse since May of 2022. The spouse, Randy, does not provide any support or contribute to the household. Very important, right? The TP, again, I'm using shorthands, TP, taxpayer, SP, spouse. TP, taxpayer, in this case, April, pays all of the costs of maintaining a home for both herself and her daughter. That should be TP, sorry. TP needs to abandon spouse rule and is considered unmarried for the purposes of claiming HOA status. So in other words, this statement that I wrote here, very important when a manager such as myself reviews your work. This helps me determine why you've ticked off this box. Very important, okay? If you didn't have that note and you just ticked off this box, it might mean that someone like myself might have to go back and interview the taxpayer and ask questions again that you already answered. Asked and answered and has been answered of the taxpayer. As you can see, that's duplication of work. We don't want to do that. We want to make your job and my job easier. Document, document, document. write as much notes as possible. I love doing that. In my early years of community tax aid, I wrote books. Literally, I wrote a lot about everything, and it was important because people wanted to know what my thought process was. How did I determine certain things? We want to know your thought process. How did you come to certain conclusions? In this case, in terms of the following status of this person. Okay. Um, this should have been ticked off about the virtual currency question. I'll take it off now. Again, we talked about the importance of asking this question. And again, if this person did have an interest in Bitcoins or virtual currency, policy again, once again, is not to do it. We can do, based on FinCEN and FATCA rules, you can prepare a return if somebody has an interest in a foreign bank account. We don't come across that often. Certain people in community tax aid are responsible for filing these FATCA separately, separate electronic transmission. So if you do come across that, of course, number one, if there's any income earned on that foreign bank account, recorded here in United States dollars. Somehow we'll have to translate that foreign currency into United States dollars. But if it meets certain thresholds, they have to disclose the fact that they do have an interest in a bank account in a foreign country. Okay. We need to know this for demographic purposes. We're towards the bottom of page 1. Did we prepare this return last year? And the answer in this case is no. And that gets us to going in terms of our outreach. How did this person learn about us? How did they know about us? Well, in this case, it was through the website. So make sure you answer these questions. We want to know how effective our outreach is in terms of that person learning about us through our website, through or through another neighbor of his or hers who recommended us. We need to know this. We'd like to know this. Did the taxpayer file a return for 2021? In this case, yes. Did the taxpayer receive a notice from the IRS? No. What's the language spoken at home? English. Again, you might be encountering people who speak a language other than English, and they might be comfortable speaking Spanish or French or Mandarin. And hopefully we have somebody at our storefront locations who have that language capability. We talked about the importance of having an email address, and here's April's email address. Taxpayer's phone number, that's important for us to have too. We have to reach out to her, or in some cases, we might have to enter this information in TaxSlayer as well. Right-hand side of page 1 towards the bottom, can someone claim the taxpayer because then that taxpayer, April, can claim May as her dependent, right? Remember the rules for qualifying children and dependency? The taxpayer himself cannot be dependent on someone else. Identity of that victim, we talked about the importance of that, and enter the PIN number if you have it. Are the income limits set? Yes, in this case. Again, we do returns of income limits above these limits. We have done that. Again, for long-time taxpayers, you need a management's approval. Manager will put their initials there. We're going to e-file this return. For simplicity's sake, for purposes of this example, I didn't, well, what am I saying? I did. I'm sorry, I did. And silly me. I gave you information about the person's New York State driver's license ID. So shame on me. It is 640389969. You guys see where I'm getting this? The issue date, I don't have it, but let's say it's 12/1/2018. Whoops, let's try it this way. The expiration date, let's say, it's usually the birth date of this person. So it's going to be 5/1/2028. So shame on me for not putting that down. Document code number is more or less a 3-digit code number. I gave that to you in the information. It is X27. You're going to see on the ID card a string of numbers and letters, or letters and numbers. Just take the first 3 letters or letters and numbers. The first 3 we need to know, guys. So what I wrote here is incorrect, and I took it out. All right. Again, for purposes of this presentation, April's going to get a paper check. Again, if for any refund. If April wanted direct deposit, we would enter this information about the bank. Routing number is an identification of the bank. The account number is a W-2. Information from the W. You take the W-2 in front of you, enter the information. As you can see, the box numbers correspond to the information on the W-2. It's essentially a copy job. Tom has structured this part of the checklist. If you're using it on the screen, it'll automatically foot. As you can see, I enter these numbers here and it automatically dropped down to here. That's unemployment compensation from box 14. Excuse me, disability insurance. I'm sorry. Yeah, something like that. Disability insurance from box 14. State, city withholdings, Social Security. Again, take that information, plug it in here, scroll down into all the other information. We talked about the bank account information for 2022 being $48. That goes there. Some of the information that you receive on some of the documents might have withholdings, as you can see here or here or here or here. Make sure you're entering that information on withholding. It is especially true of pension distributions, which you see here, right? Pension distributions might have federal or state withholdings here. We talked about the Box 7 code. How important is it for us to know about the Box 7 code? We even asked you, put it here in terms of determining the tax treatment. Very important, once again, to know what that Box 7 code is. As you can see, a lot of information in terms of other income sources are not there. I know that you've asked of it because you see this little box here? We ticked off the box that ticked off. What does it mean to me as a manager? It means that you've asked the question. You asked the question of the taxpayer, person doesn't have ordinary dividends or foreign bank accounts or self-employment income. I know by reviewing your work that you've asked this question. What if you asked the questions and never ticked off these boxes? Well, somebody like me reviewing your work says you didn't ask. Once again, it means a duplication of time. It means we're spending twice as much time doing something. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I stress the importance of entering information on every box, even if there's nothing involved. I know by looking at this box, you have asked the taxpayer this question. Okay, please do that for us managers, guys. It saves us a lot of time. Towards the bottom here, where it says total income, it is more or less some of these numbers. I don't think it's an automatic calculation. You might have to calculate those numbers. Again, total income, federal withholdings, state withholdings, and even city withholdings. Other sources of income here, and again, I apologize. I said one thing and I'm not really being consistent. Like for example, here, there are no boxes here to say that you've asked this person about Social Security. How do I know that you've asked? Well, based on what I see in front of me, I don't know whether you asked, to be honest with you. But I think for me, for a manager, why don't you put in 0? I think, and maybe it's depends on which manager you're dealing with. If I see you put zeros here, I know that you've at least asked the taxpayer. In my mind, that's how I take it, right? Same is true of other sources of income here, right? How do I know you asked of it? Excuse me. It's because you have zeros here. So kind of flip-flopping on what I previously said, but again, I think it's important. Make sure, even if it's nothing or not applicable, that you make an entry on the various lines. At least I know when I review your work that you've done this. Okay, we don't have information about refunds. But again, if it was a CTA taxpayer from the prior year, I would really emphasize try to get those refund numbers. We talked about this part of the screen. Person have any adjustments for AGI? Nothing. But again, you guys did a great job in terms of ticking off these boxes. Does the person have any retirement contributions? It might show up on contributions to traditional IRA. You have a Roth IRA. You have a 401k plan. 403 and a 457 plan are really 401k plans for not-for-profit organizations or from government entities. That's their version of a 401k plan. You would see this on a W-2. And again, you've asked and answered it, and the answer is no. Okay. Standard deduction versus itemizing your deductions. Again, do us a favor, guys, in terms of the comparison, the comparison of the standard versus the itemized. go to our ready reference. Go to the column for, in this case, head of household. What is the standard deduction of a head of household taxpayer? It's that number. List the potential itemized deduction amounts. Compare them. Okay. This number to this. And it shouldn't. It should be adding everything from here to here. And I think Tom perhaps has corrected this. I think this is an old version of a fill-in checklist. So but I had to delete that. Guess what? It shows up again. But I think I'm using, in all fairness, an old version of the checklist. I believe this item was caught and was corrected. Okay. So in other words, we're comparing this number to the sum of everything here. So when we come up to potential itemized deduction amounts, we talked about medical expenses, where we talked about that AGI test. Make sure you're doing that before you enter a number here. Contributions, losses from federally declared disasters. Let's skip this for a moment. Real estate taxes, if the person owns a home or co-op, interest income from, interest expense from the residence. Remember the 1098 form. Gambling losses, again, for our gambling friend who got lucky in the casino. How did we get the state with tax withheld number? Well, it says state tax, city withholding, or sales tax. See the manager. But in terms of the 756 number, for purposes of this example, it is the sum of New York State withholding tax, New York City withholding tax, plus this $31 is considered a tax paid by the taxpayer. The sum of these three numbers, 31, 496, 230, is 756. In other words, itemized deductions total 756. The standard deduction in this example is 19,400. In this case, we can use the 19,400. We talked last week about exceptions to that rule where you have to use the itemized figure no matter what that number is. I'm not going to review that. You guys can review the notes from last week if you like. Page 4 is devoted solely to the earned income credit, and answer these questions and tick off the boxes. So worksheet A, and again, it's really small here, but you kind of see it now. Worksheet B, which is on page 4 now, applies to all taxpayers. Did the taxpayer have wages of self-employment? Did the person in effect have earned income? The answer is yes. Is that person's, the taxpayer, in this case, April, is her AGI less than these numbers? Well, she has one qualifying child, so she's number, yes. Is she a citizen of the United States? Yes. A non-resident alien? No. Doesn't matter in this case. Going back to question 6 on the right-hand side now, investment income question. It's less than 10,003. It's only $48 in this case. Is she a qualifying child of another person? No. Has the IRS ever disallowed the earned income credit? You can ask this person for purposes of the example. No. Does the person have foreign income? Needs to be reported on the 2555? No. So in other words, all of these shaded boxes are checked. That's great. They pass this threshold. We go to child, worksheet C. The person does not have a qualifying child, worksheet D. Well, April does have a qualifying child, April. So, April has a qualifying child, May. I'm mixing up my months in taxpayer, sorry. So April, in this case, is only going to file, or we're going to prepare worksheet C on this page. And what is it saying? Is the taxpayer a qualifying child of another taxpayer? Must be answered no. In this case, it is no. Is a qualifying child, son, daughter, etc. In other words, a relationship that's being met. Is qualifying child either unmarried? In this case, yes, or married and independent of another taxpayer. We talked about that exception to the rule about married taxpayers and whether or not we can claim them. Does the qualifying child have a social security number? Yes. Did the qualifying child live in the United States with the taxpayer over half of the year in the United States? Yes. Taxpayer younger than the QC younger than the taxpayer or disabled? Yes. Was 19 full-time student under 24 permanently disabled? The child is 10 years old. The answer is yes. Could anyone else claim this child? In this example, no. Not Randy. Whereabouts unknown. Randy did contribute at all to May. We know of nobody else who can do this. So in terms of worksheet C, all of the shaded boxes are checked. She has passed the 2021 and 2020 returns. Make sure you look at this and answer this question regarding calculations of the earned income credit for those years. Remember that special rule back then. Page 5 is devoted for the most part to the real property tax credit. We talked about that and how to read this part of the checklist. And let's focus in on question 8. What does it say? And we know based on last week's lecture about household income of all members, is it more than $18,000? And the answer is yes. We know that April worked and earned $25,000. So we know that the household gross income is more than $18,000. Well, guess what? I can answer yes. And if the answer is yes, CP is not eligible for the real property tax credit. Now, again, because I've been doing this for so many years, I focused on the household gross income question of this part of the checklist. Why? Because if I were to go to all of these other questions, answer them, and then get to this, I know in the back of my mind that based on the answer to this question, this person will not get this credit. So for me, in terms of a time-saving gesture, and perhaps you can do this, and based on my review of your work, and based on what I see, I won't disagree with what you're doing based on what I'm about to say. If you know that this one question disqualifies this person, why even bother going to the early parts of this part of the checklist, right? Doesn't that save time for everybody involved? For yourself for entering this, for me for reviewing it, right? Does that make sense? I think it does. Okay, towards the bottom of page 5, again, is questions germane to a New York State and New York City return. We talked about sales taxes on out-of-state and internet purchase, not happening here. Person's not a volunteer firefighter or have income in another state. We talked about the school credit. What to say here is dependent of another person. The answer is no. Consider filing NYC 210. And again, generally speaking, the two criteria is the person, can that person, the taxpayer in this case, April, can April be claimed? Not necessarily was, can April be claimed as a dependent by somebody else? In this case, no. And then that's the important first criteria that's been met. And the other one talks about the number of months that April was a resident of New York City. Okay. So she's going to get the full benefit of school tax credit. And I'll show you what that looks like soon. Page 6. Well, in this case, it kind of makes sense. A 10-year-old kid after school most likely might have someone taking care, have someone being caring for the child while April works. But for simplicity's sake, nobody's being paid to take care of the child. Maybe it's a good neighbor who's helping out April while she works and takes care of May. So in other words, question 1, did the taxpayer incur expenses? Let's just say the neighbor's doing a favor for April for purposes of our example, and that person wasn't paid, right? So this would not happen based on what I've just said. No education credits because this person's not in a secondary school yet. Federal stimulus payments, again, apply to prior years. It's not happening here. Advanced child care payments, child tax credit payments, again, for the prior years, it's not happening here. We have to ask about health insurance, not happening here. You sign off on a return, you prepared it, you may have inputted, me who reviews it. Again, based on the way we're set up here at Community Tax Aid, the person who prepares it and the person who computer inputs it might not be the same person. It might be two individuals, two different people who are more comfortable perhaps interviewing people or who are more comfortable computer inputting. You can do that. My personal opinion is if you want the full benefit of learning here at Community Tax Aid, try to do both sides. Try to interview a person, try to do the computer input. I think you learn a lot more by doing that. But if you don't want to do that, we won't force you to do something you don't want to do. You can split up the test, and that's okay. All right, so we've gotten an idea of interpreting the documents, coming up with great conclusions about this taxpayer. Let us try to enter the information on this person in our tax layer program. Let's try to get back to that. And here we go. And here I see we're back on tax layer. I have to enter this information again about me because I timed out. And okay, we're back. All right. So I promise you guys, we're going to prepare this return from beginning to end. I don't know the bottom line results. I'm going to be as surprised as you are. So we're entering this return. How do we do that? Well, you're back on the tax layer program. We're going to go to start a new 2020 return. So we're going to hit this box. And I know you guys can't do this, so you just have to follow along with me, right? All right, it's asking now for the Social Security number, and that is of the taxpayer, April Robertson. And let's see, her Social Security number is right. I've entered it. We need to enter it a second time to confirm that we're entering it correctly. Okay, I've entered the information twice. And again, you see where this information is coming from. It's in the information about April. It's also on her W-2, right? Oh, I'm sorry. It says here we're already using this. That's strange. One more time. Oh wait, 1477711. I'm sorry, guys. Let's try. Let's do 2. Okay. So perhaps I used this mock number somewhere else before, but I want to do this for you guys from start to finish. So apparently I've used that number somewhere else, or by coincidence, it happened to be someone else's W-2. That's really strange. It's like hitting the lottery. That number came up for some reason. So for purposes of this example, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just changing the last digit on April's W-2 from a 1 to a 2. So hopefully we can enter the information in tax layer. As soon as it's up and running, it's doing its little work here. And so let's just slow my end just a little bit patient. Let me check the chat. That makes sense. Okay. And for some reason, this is taking a little bit longer than I thought. It's really, really, really slow. And that could be the internet here on my end, but I'm hooked up here. Oh, come on. Okay. I'm really sorry, guys. Let's try to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Emil, what's the name of that person?
April Robertson. Do you see it there? I think I entered it already. And you see the SSN. I didn't enter this. I wanted to enter it from scratch. And see something there, Tom?
Checking on it now.
Emil, you've been
Yes.
breaking up for most of the morning. Is it possible that there's some congestion on your end for the internet?
It could be. Maybe I have so many things open. Let me
Try
close
turning off
some.
your video,
You think so?
because
Okay,
that
hold
takes
on.
up some bandwidth.
Okay, but you can still see the screens, right, that are shared, right?
Yes.
Okay. And saying get out of this. And sorry, guys. Whoops. What the? Tom, something's really wrong here. Can you see what's going on? Oh boy.
Yeah, I see it.
You see what's going on here? You see this? I can't get in. Oh, what's going on, Tom? Can you call up can somebody else call up the program and share the program? Okay, Tom, do you have the program up and running?
I have it running up. Hold on.
Okay, so let's use your version of the program. I'm so sorry, guys. Some sort of glitch in the program on my end. But of course, Tom, you have a different version of it, and it's Keisha's a different version of it. All right, no problem. So go to starting. Well, let's go to client search, Keisha. And the last four digits of the social is 4711. Is something listed there?
I think one of our volunteers has started the return
Somebody has started,
on 4711 and 47112.
but do you have a taxpayer's name?
There's no name on
There's
there.
no name.
Okay, so if you go to 4711, let's do it that way. Okay, so if you don't mind, Keisha,
Mhm.
I guess you have the information on
Actually, I don't have it printed out in front of me. Can you just say it to me? I'll type it.
Sure. So the taxpayer's information, first name is April. Last name Robertson. That social is right. Her date of birth is 5/1/1987. Occupation secretary. It's possible to blow up your screen, kind of small here. Let's just scroll down. So yeah,
Can
that's
you
fine.
see it? Okay.
Yeah, better. Thank you. So scroll down. So some of these things, ladies and gentlemen, don't apply to April. The question about the $3 of presidential campaign fund it does apply. So in other words, it doesn't affect the person's bottom line. Does she want $3 of the tax that have been taken out to go to special, what's called presidential campaign fund? That's a taxpayer decision, and you can ask that person that question. We have a line on the checklist, page 1 towards the top, to answer that. And none of these other things are pertinent to the taxpayer. You can scroll down, Keisha. So now we're entering address information on April. Her address, Keisha, is 693 Stone Avenue. And of course, you guys, when you enter information, you're doing it the same way as Keisha's doing right now. Apartment 10, Brooklyn, New York. There's going to be 11211. If you notice, guys, once Keisha enters 11211, automatically Brooklyn shows up. Let's go down and New York shows up. Let's put in a phone number for her, Keisha. We'll call it 646-555-1234. And her email, we're going to say april@aol.com. Okay. And go to filing status button, and
Where
Not
do I
happening.
go next?
It should have moved there, but hit continue. I'm sorry, go to right-hand side, continue. Oh, there we go, it's finally gone. Oh, sorry. Going to the New York return, that happens sometimes when you enter basic information, guys. It automatically kicks into New York even before you enter income information. Remember the questions we talked about? The answer to the first question is yes. Resident of Knockers, no. New York City resident, yes. Second question is yes. Okay, full year resident in New York City, number of months in New York City, 12. Okay, scroll down. Maintain quarters in New York City, the answer is yes. And scroll down. Yeah, scroll down, please. And scroll down, please, more. This should be like a continue a button, or yeah, hit continue. And let's go back to filing status, left-hand side. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so in other words, as you can see with that warning, it wouldn't allow us to get out of the screen because all of the New York questions weren't answered. So what does it say here? Permanent home address different than the address on the return? The answer is no. The address is the same. The homeowner tax rebate credit, it also only applies to Yonkers people. So let's hit continue, Keisha. The county, that's Brooklyn is Kings County. We put that in your outline, the New York outline last week. Go to select school district, Keisha, under select. Find Kings or Brooklyn. I believe it's Brooklyn, I'm sorry. So you can do it with the drop down too, if you like. You see Brooklyn.
Oh, they have too many.
Is
Did I miss Brooklyn?
not yet. There it is. See Brooklyn? So in other words, when it comes to the information on the school codes and all that stuff, you can do it two ways: entering the county on the top and the school district's name on the bottom, or you can enter the 3-digit code, which we have too. So if you don't enter the code and just enter this information we just entered, it will put in the code number. It's really kind of strange in terms of this part of the program. Anyway, we might as well put in the code number for Brooklyn is 519. And again, you'll find that information, ladies and gentlemen, in the New York State outline that we gave you. Hit continue. And dependents qualifying children, the answer is yes. So now we're going back more or less to the federal screen. We're asking for information. First name is May. The child, April's child is May. Last name is Robertson. And May's birth date is 6/21/2012. And the social security number of May is 088-44-1239. Okay. It's asking questions about May. Was this individual a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, resident alien? The answer is yes. Remember, those are more or less the questions on QC status. The relationship to the taxpayer is a daughter. Number of months, 12. Scroll down. Person was not over 18, not disabled. Is the person dependent? That's not being checked. Not. Okay, so none of these boxes have to be checked. Hit continue, but you have to go through it again. It's QC or QR rules and the exceptions to the QC and QR rules. That was those boxes signify. That is the only qualifying child we're entering. If you had more than one, you would enter it here. Hit continue. Let's enter W-2 information. We have a W-2. So begin. And here we go. Standard. Scroll down a little bit. Scroll down. Scroll down. Okay. So I'm sorry. Box B. We're entering the EIN of Jerry Mason. The business is 13-439-7759. Okay, the name of the employer, Jerry Mason, Esquire.
I am having some sort of
It's okay.
lag. What is going on?
You're lucky you have access to this. I don't for some reason all of a sudden. Anyway, we get into it. Then it's, of course, it's a teamwork in action. The address of Jerry Mason's business, 57 Madison Avenue. Okay, the zip code 10036. And once you hit that in, the city information already pops in. Information on wages, box 1, Keisha, it's going to be $25,000. Okay, box 2, Federal withholding 2,500. If you guys have a copy, a hard copy of the W-2, as you can see, the amount of calculated Social Security tax withheld and Medicare tax withheld agrees to the W-2, so you know the W-2 is okay. Let's scroll down to box 14, Keisha. Okay, the
14?
drop down on 14.
Mhm.
So yeah, so believe it or not, when it comes to SUI, which is well, in this case, it should have been disability. It's not really listed here, believe it or not, for New York items. So what we're going to put in is other, not listed here. You can put in other, Keisha. And the amount, in this case, $31, rounded up, 31. That's more or less the disability that's taken out of somebody's pay, 60 cents a week, maximum $30.60. Scroll down, please, Keisha.
Emil, just one question. Why are boxes 3 to 6 red?
Those are calculations. So in other words, you put in information on the wages, it automatically carried through to boxes 3 and 5. TaxSlate is automatically calculating boxes 4 and 6. Okay, so in some cases, 3 and 5 might be different, and the calculations on 4 and 6 might be different. In this case, the wages and Social Security wages, Medicaid wages are all the same. Okay,
Okay.
that's what that is.
Okay.
Scroll down, please.
Mhm.
Go to the state information. Box 15, to scroll down, we should see New York somewhere. And 25,000 of wages carries forward. The employer's ID number is 134397759, which is similar to the EIN number, guys. The state income tax withheld, box 17, is $496. Round up, guys, to the nearest dollar. That's why we're putting in whole dollars. Okay, local wages, $25,000 on box 18. Box 19, again, rounded up to the nearest dollar, guys, $230. This rounding up, we're talking about, you should do the same thing on the checklist too, of everything. Okay, locality is New York City. Scroll down and hit scroll. There should be a continue line, I believe, somewhere. Do you see it on the bottom there? No. All right, hit continue. That's the only W-2 in this case. And well, as you can, before we continue, look at the right-hand side. It's automatic calculating what's going on. We have the AGI of 25,000. So far, that's the only thing we've entered. But look at those numbers. The federal refund, the state refund, really good. And you know why that's happening? A lot of the credits that the person is entitled to, most likely the earned income credit. We talked about how substantial that number is. And as you can see, it's a big difference. A big piece of change is going into this person's pocket, apparently. Let us go to Schedule B, the 1099 interest form, because April's only other source of income is the bank account interest. Now, before we enter it, okay.
Let me go back.
So we're going into, so again, we're entering, again, either interest or dividend, foreign bank account, or savings bond. In this case, it's interest income. Again, the first box. And again, if the interest income in total is less than $1,500, we're going to enter it here. If it's more than $1,500, we have to enter it individually. Okay, so we're going to tick off that. So if you have 2 or 3 bank accounts and the total of the bank is less than 1,500, you should enter it that way. But apparently, we still have to enter information about the bank. And in this case, it's called Citibank, CITY Bank. The ID number of Citibank is 473097527. The address of the bank is 1 Columbus Circle. I'm surprised they're asking for this because, again, it's less than $1,500. We shouldn't be doing this. Anyway, that's my understanding. Zip code 10036. New York City already pops up. Scroll down. Box 1 is the only information we're going to enter. You can put in $48. Okay, that's it. Let's get out of this. Continue. So once again, on the right-hand side, ladies and gentlemen, AGI changes by $41. It might have changed the federal refund, state refund. I'm not really sure. Okay. Earned income credit. Let's look at the earned income credit section where it says deductions. Keisha, earned income credit. So again, these are the 8867 questions, guys. And again, more or less, it's not exactly phrased the same way verbatim, but the information on answering these questions is more or less kind of summarized, if you want to think of it this way, in page 4 of the checklist on the questions pertaining to the earned income credit. Use the verbiage, the language, the statements in page 4. It kind of conforms to what you're seeing in front of you. For example, was a taxpayer a non-resident alien for any part of the year? There is a question more or less you'll see on that checklist. The answer is no. Is the taxpayer a qualifying child of another person? No. Did you complete the return based on the information for 2022 provided by the taxpayer? The answer is yes. In other words, we're preparing this return based on everything the person has given us, right? Next, did you interview the taxpayer, ask adequate questions? Yeah, we went through all of our checklists. That is answering that question. The answer is yes. Did you review adequate information to determine? Yes. Scroll down. Did any information provided by the taxpayer in connection appear to be incorrect, incomplete, or inconsistent? Again, based on your interview, do you think you have everything to answer and prepare the return? The answer is no. We don't believe it's incorrect or inconsistent or incomplete. All right. To satisfy the retention requirement, the answer is yes. We're making copies of all the information the taxpayer has given us. The checklist is also evidence that we've done our work. All right. Sometimes they're asking about notes. You can write checklists and copies of forms and things like that. What's being typed here flows through to the 8867. Did you ask page? Yeah. Now we're talking about head of household status. Yes, to taxpayer whether or not she can provide information. Well, she answered the questions about herself and her spouse, and we've entered in the checklist that is adequate information that she's provided. Were any credits disallowed? That was a question on page 4 of the checklist. No. The answer is no.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we ask the taxpayer? Yes. Were any of these disallowed? The answer is no. That's it. The answer is no to that. That's it. I'm sorry, I mixed up the questions. For May, is the person a qualifying child on any other's return? The answer is no. Earned income credit questions. Have you determined that this taxpayer is eligible to claim the EIC for the number of children shown? The answer is yes. Did you explain to the taxpayer that she may not claim the EIC if the child did not live with the taxpayer over half of the year? Right? The answer is yes. You explained to the person about the tiebreaker rules. It's not happening here, but you explained it if necessary. The answer is yes. We talked about the tiebreaker rules last week. It's summarized there, as you can see. Child tax credit questions. It might happen here. Okay. So did the child reside with the taxpayer who's claiming the child tax credit? Remember the outline about the child tax credit, an additional credit that April might get based on the age of the qualifying child, et cetera, et cetera. Did the child reside with the taxpayer? Yes. Yes. Did you explain to the taxpayer that she may not claim the child tax credit? The taxpayer did not live with the child for over half a year. We explained that. Did you explain to the taxpayer the rules about claiming for divorced child parents? In other words, allocating this child tax credit. Remember about the 8832 last year? It's not happening this year, but you explained it if necessary. Head of household questions. And Shelley talked about how comprehensive this due diligence checklist is. It's asking about so many different things. Make sure you're answering all the questions about head of household, about earned income credit, about the child tax credit. It's asking about all of these things, and you can find the answers to these questions either through the course of your interview or certain parts of our checklist. When it comes to the head of household, have you determined that the person was unmarried or considered unmarried? Yes. Did you certify that all the answers to this form is true and best of your knowledge correct and completed? Yes. Scroll down, hit the boxes, determine EIC eligibility, And guess what? Everything's answered and everything's certified. It looks like it's a go. Everything's highlighted in green. Based on your answers, your understanding of the taxpayer, your interview with the taxpayer, the responses on our checklist, it's happening. It's in green. It looks like it's a go in terms of the earned income credit. Let's hit continue. On the federal side, we can ignore this. Another important question before we get to the state return. Before we get to the state return, let's go back to the health insurance question. Health insurance on the left-hand side. Person doesn't have a 1095, so the answer is no. Hit continue. And again, some of the things you're seeing, you might not see because Keisha has a different access to the TaxSlayer program. Go to the state return. What we've done that. Let's go to e-filing or summary and print. Let's go to summary. Okay, e-filing here. You guys will see this. Okay, scroll down. So again, you can verify some of the information you've entered about April, about the child, about the earned income, about the standard deduction that she's entitled to, about taxable income. Scroll down again. Go to number 2 on the
Emil,
left-hand
do you
side.
want to see the summary view?
Can you do that? Okay, yeah, it looks like Keisha can do that. I'm not really sure if you can. Scroll down, all these other things. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the regular view.
And 40 view. There's the page 2. Oh, here
There
we
you
go.
And then go to page, scroll down. Yeah, you can do it from the top to the bottom. Yeah, number 2, there you go. So in other words, we're continuing what the federal return looks like. Small amount of tax, tax has been the 553. Again, the child tax credit is eliminating that. The unused portion of the child tax credit, which is line 28, because that number plus line 21 equals $2,000. We know that the refundable portion of the child tax credit can be up to $1,500 from last week. The W-2 amount of $2,500 we got from the W-2. Look at that earned income credit, almost $3,000. Okay, we have no tax on line 24. We have the W-2 withholdings. We have the earned income credit. We have the refundable portion of the child tax credit. That is how we're getting $6,888 being this person's refund. Very nice, right? That's it. I don't know, again, if we can do the state return. You guys don't have the capability of reviewing state screens. Let's go to the e-filing section. Keisha, you guys have that capability. Let's go to e-file.
Before we do that, I want to make sure
Yeah.
people realize that they have the routing and account number information. You should always be asking our clients if they want to do that.
Yeah. Again, and we're going to do that on the e-file portion for purposes of this example. We're not doing that. So again, you guys can do this. The return results. How does this person want his refund? Go to the drop down. In this case, it's going to be e-file the return with a paper check. Paper check. If it was going to be direct deposit, then again, we need the routing number, the account number. I didn't list it here for simplicity's sake on this return. The state refund, again, it's going to be e-file with a paper check. But again, ask for bank account information. It is advantageous for somebody to get a direct deposit. Faster processing of the return. You don't have to have searched the mail for a check that perhaps may be diverted. You know, it's guaranteed to go into your bank account if a person wants that done. It is the person's decision. Scroll down, please. Have the email information about April. Hit continue. We don't charge a fee. Scroll down, hit continue. The ID number, in this case, for simplicity's sake, no driver's license. I'm sorry, we do have that. What am I saying? I'm so sorry. We do have that. We'll have a driver's license. Scroll down, please. Driver's license number 640-3899-69. The issue date We can say, we'll just make up the date. I know I made up a date for the checklist. 05, 07, 2018. This date, the state is New York. The expiration date is going to be 5/1/2028. It more or less conforms to the person's birth date 10 years from now, 10 years from the issue date. The driver's license code X27. So again, in some cases, look up a little bit, the person won't have a driver's license or state ID. That is conceivably possible because the person never got to the motor vehicles to get an up-to-date driver's license because they couldn't do that because of COVID. That is conceivable. That could happen. Scroll down, hit continue. Next step, that is a summary, what's going on here. You can ignore that. Scroll down. Scroll down, please. Scroll down. Scroll down again. Tax return status logs. So in other words, based on the storefront you're working at, you're going to store it in one of these folders here. If you hit view all tags, could you do that for me? Keisha, view all return tags. Yes, view all return tags. Those are the other storefronts involved. Or if you're doing this virtually, I think we have something here that says virtually e-sign or something like that. But as you can see, those are all the storefronts that we had once upon a time. Corona, Fountain House should be listed there somewhere. Bed-Stuy, the Brooklyn location. So make sure you're ticking that off. And then that's really it. Scroll down a little bit more, please. You mark the return as ready for review. Manager picks it up and reviews it. And scroll down and hit save and exit. And in terms of your job and your responsibility as preparers, you've done your job in terms of entering information here. I do apologize for these technical glitches that slowed me down a little bit in terms of
There's an
entering
error on the
information.
page.
Okay, where's
Oh, I have to choose one of these. Which one am I choosing, Emil?
Say wait for e-file at this point. Wait for e-file, upper left, that one, yeah. Okay, yeah. And then save and exit. So once again, I thank you, Keisha, for helping us out in terms of walking us through the program. I apologize for the technical glitches on my side. Hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this portion of the class. The rest of the class is going to be conducted by another instructor, Tamara, who's going to walk you through the virtual tax return process. Thank you so much, guys. I'll be here after the lecture looking at some of the chats. Thank you so much. Take it away, Tamara.
Okay, thanks, Emil. That was great. Thank you, guys. How are we handling questions? Is that going to be for tomorrow, or is that...
We'll look at the chat and we'll also deal with it tomorrow.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys all see the virtual?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, actually, 1 second. I need to...
You're not hearing anymore.
I know, I'm sorry. I just had to fix something. Okay. So this is basically how it works. Like if you guys are volunteers and you want to go in and say, I want to help out and prepare a tax return, this is where how you start when you log in and you say, what do I do first? So everybody should have access to the Gmail and should already be signed up with that. And that's how you're going to interact with taxpayers. That's how you're going to interact with managers, assistant managers, and experienced volunteers. So when you go into your Gmail, you should see on the left side, you're going to see the mail, the chat, the spaces, and the meet. So you should first go to the spaces button, and the spaces are where we have 3 different spaces. One is called taxpayer assignments, one is called pairing room, and one is called the Q&A for all volunteers. And when you want to go in and start a return, you first need to go to the taxpayer assignment room. And what that's going to look like basically is you're going to see taxpayer's name here and like in the screenshot. And then when you want to go and say, I want to work on that person, then you can basically go to the assignee part and put your name in there. And I'll go through this in a live demo after I talk through it with you guys. And, you know, feel free to let me know if you have any questions after we go through the demo. The pairing room. So Emil mentioned during his training that you can pair with someone if you are more comfortable doing the interview and you don't want to do the tax layer portion. You can, you know, go to this space section, put a chat in there and say, hey, I'm doing taxpayer 123's interview. Is there anybody that can do the computer input? And somebody hopefully will say yes. And you guys will have to just make sure that you mark who's doing the computer input in this section in the taxpayer assignment room, because the managers and assistant managers want to know who's working on all the returns. So first you go into the taxpayer assignment room, you assign yourself. I'll show you how that works. And then when you guys go ahead and assign yourself somebody, that sends an alert to the assistant managers that, you know, suddenly, you know, there's a volunteer that has chosen this person to work on. So the assistant manager will forward you an email, and in that email, we'll have a link to the taxpayer's Google Drive. And in the Google Drive will be all of the documents that you need to prepare the return. So once you assign yourself, within 24 hours, you will get the email. So that's like process here. So the first thing, all volunteers will self-assign. And then number 2 here, all volunteers can pair with another volunteer in the pairing room. Number 3, and once you've self-assigned yourself a client, you'll receive the submitted documents from an assistant manager within 24 hours. And again, that will be an email to your email. And you'll have the right to go in and upload the checklist as well. But once you finish uploading the checklist, we'll cut off the rights to go back in and view the Google document. So we only share access to that Google Drive when you assign yourself, and we take access to that Google Drive when you're done. And that's just for safety purposes. Number 4, volunteers review the documents and schedule an interview with the client via email, which is preferred, or via phone. And then new to CTA clients must have a video interview. So if you know that this client, this taxpayer, has been with us before and you are comfortable just having a phone interview with them, that's fine. But for if it's a new client, we have to verify their identity. So when you have a video interview, you can just, you know, the person uploaded their license, which their name matches all their documents, and you're seeing what they look like based on their ID. They match up, you know, you have the right person. So this is when someone logs in as a new to CTA client, and we'll let you know if it's a new to CTA client. The assistant managers will when they post the name of the taxpayer. And then, so you've gone in, you've done the interview, someone's done the tax layer input. And then in order to finish and say, okay, I'm done, this is ready for a review for a manager, you'll go back into this space here, and then you click on this little button next to this little dot next to the taxpayer's name, and then it will go to the completed section. And that signals an alert to the assistant manager that you've finished the interview and tax computer input, and a manager will go ahead and review it. And there'll be there's a separate process for a manager review. If there's any managers on this call right now and you guys want to know about your role in this, feel free to reach out to me. We can set up another training session for that. But this is just for the regular volunteers right now. So once you finish clicking on that button and you're ready to, go ahead and assign yourself someone else. And we ask that you try to complete all returns within a week. And if you have any trouble finishing within 1 week, please alert the assistant manager that is working with you, and that person the assistant manager has sent you that email. So that's how you know who the assistant manager is. I'll be an assistant manager. Keisha White will be an assistant manager. Trinice Patterson and Gracie Ann will be assistant managers. We may have additional assistant managers as well, but you'll know that once you get emails with links to the Google Drive. So, and if you have any questions like during the process, we have the Q&A for all volunteers space, and it's just a chat where you can go in and pose a question. So if you have any questions about when you're doing the interview and you're not sure if someone qualifies for a credit, feel free to go into that space here, the Q&A, and ask. And this will be monitored by managers, assistant managers, and experienced volunteers. And hopefully you'll get an answer soon, and you'll be able to go back and finish whatever you were working on. And so again, this Q&A is for, the interview process, or for any issues you have with TaxSlayer, not sure where you have to enter a credit in, things like that. Feel free to just go in and ask in the Q&A. And if you're not comfortable asking in the shared public space like this, feel free to reach out to me or another assistant manager, and you can do a private chat in the Gmail. And that private chat is right here on the left side bar under mail. There's chat. You can just enter in someone's name and just chat with them. The thing that you should know about the task section. So when you go into these spaces, and I'll show you this in the live demo, when you go into these spaces, there's three menu bars there's a menu bar on the top with three different tabs. One is the chat tab, one is the files tab, and one is the tasks tab. When you go into the assignment room, you only really want to be on the tasks tab. There's nothing, the chat really most of the chat happens in the Q&A if you have any questions, and files don't get posted in this public space. They'll only be posted to the Google Drive. So you want to go to the tasks tab over here, and that's where you're going to see this layout where it says the taxpayer's name, a date, and the assignment. And then the last thing I want to mention is Google Meets. So when you do a video call with the client, with the taxpayer, you want to do it using Google Meet, and that's the bottom icon here on the left side of the page. And it's really just like Zoom. If you're not comfortable with Google Meets and you're not really sure how to use it, I suggest, going in and trying one out, maybe with a friend or family member, just so you can get comfortable with has a little bit different functionality than Zoom, but it works the same way. Someone will be able to share their screen with you. Somebody will be able, you'll see people's video. You can turn on mute, you can turn off video, things like that. So that's how the video calls will go. Some people prefer to do a phone interview with the client. So again, you can do a phone interview as long as that person has been a previous client of CTA. If it's a new to CTA, it must be a video call. And that's just to verify their identity. And some people don't like to do phone interviews because the taxpayer has your phone number. I personally don't really care if a taxpayer has my phone number. Usually they're not calling you at odd hours or anything. So, but whatever your personal preference, you can either do the Google Meet or a phone call. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into this live demo. I'm going to change my screen here, and I'm just going to go over the process of how you would go in, assign yourself a taxpayer, and what happens after that. So I'm going to go into my Gmail, and I go into the so I'm going to go into this test, which you guys don't have, but it's just it will show you the test of where I can do some demoing. So you're going to go into the tasks bar, and you're going to see, okay, well, there's been a taxpayer, Corona taxpayer, Emil taxpayer, and Fountain House Maria X taxpayer are all here, but they've already been assigned. So, Emil taxpayer has been assigned by Trinice. So I know that Trinice is working on this. So I've already sent Trinice all the information that she has to work on, and say that Trinice she only wanted to do the interview, and she needed somebody to help do the computer input. She has gone into the parent room already and said, hey, I'm doing I'm doing the interview. Can someone else do the computer input? And then someone can respond and say yes. And I can see that going into the tasks tab, someone named Joe Schmo has already agreed to do the computer input. So So either Joe Schmo or Trinice has to go back into the tasks tab and enter in Joe Schmo computer input. And that's so that assistant managers know who's working on the computer input portion, because the computer input portion, that person who's doing it needs to also have access to the Google Drive to see the documents. And that's why we need both the name of the interview volunteer and the computer input volunteer. And I know Emil mentioned this before in his training, but it's best if you're a new volunteer to try both. Try the interview and see how you like it. Try the tax layer input, see how you like it, because it's really better if you just own the tax return. You can do it from start to finish. You'll have contact with the manager. You'll know when it's finished. You can go back to the volunteer and tell back to the taxpayer and tell them it's done. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. Whatever, we have both options available. So in Fountain House John Doe, I see that there's nobody assigned here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, so you press on this assignee, and a list of all the people in this member in this space, and I can say, okay, I'm working on it. I see my name here, Tamara Sokolowski, press on my name, assigned to me. So that sends an alert to the assistant managers. Now I'm gonna, we can go ahead and send all the documents to the person assigned. And I'll just want to show you what that looks like, what that email looks like, so you can see when it comes into your inbox. So you'll go into mail here, and you'll have an email and it says new client at new to CTA. Okay, so now I know it's a new to CTA client. I'm going to have to do a video interview. And you're going to see, I'm going to go quickly over this because this is a real person's name here, but you're going to see this person's email address, this person's phone number, the document names that has been uploaded, and the file names that have been uploaded. So the documents will actually show up here in the email. And then you can go and click through them and you can see them right away in your email. And you can also go straight to their Google Drive, and that will be an easier way just to see what all the documents are that they've uploaded. So when you put your mouse over each image, there's a little icon that comes up, and it's a little folder, and that says Organize and Drive. You're going to want to click on that and click on that link that that comes up, and what it's going to do is it's going to automatically bring you to that taxpayers folder with all the documents. So I just want to go back and show you once more. So you get this email from the assistant manager. It has all of the taxpayers information, and you hover over the document and you see this little icon, this little folder. This comes up where it says the folder's name, which is the email address. Click on it and it brings you right into their folder. So this is a previous one we've done from last year, and you can see that the checklist has been re-uploaded in here, and you guys will have to do that as well. So once you get all of this taxpayer's information, you have their email address. It's in here, Carissa Colazzo. So you're going to go ahead and email them and say, hey, are you available at this time? So I think you've already been through this at training. I'm not sure, but sorry if this is a review, but when you're in your Google Drive in shared drives, where the volunteer folder is, where you had to access all of the documents for last week's volunteer training, you're going to go down into checklist, which I believe is, it's in the training section. So here is the checklist. So I went to shared drives, I went to volunteer folder, and then in here is volunteer folder is training, and then in the training folder is the checklist. So just double click on here. So you're going to want to go to the one that says last name, first name for SS. And this is the naming convention that you need to name the checklist. I'm sorry if this is a review, but it's always good to hear it again, because this is important, because you want to have things consistent and easy to find for the managers. So you just click on this, and then you want to download it. So I'm opening this, just going to see here where I'm like, can't see the download. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the download icon. So you download it, and then I'm going to open it. I'm going to go ahead and open it in Adobe Acrobat. Let me just share my share my Adobe Acrobat quickly. I'm not going to go through it because I think you guys have already been through this, but you're going to go into Adobe Acrobat and you're going to enter in all the taxpayer information when you're doing the interview, everything that Emil just went over. And then what I want you guys to remember, I'm pretty sure Emil said this, but I just want to reiterate that you want to put your name in the prepared section, the interview volunteer, and then the computer input. If you're not doing both, you want to put the computer input volunteer's name here. And that's again to alert the manager who worked on this, because if there's any questions on the checklist, the manager needs to ask the people who worked on the checklist or the computer input, to get the information. So that's how the manager is going to know who worked on it. So that's important. Okay, so I'm going to go back to resharing here. So once you've downloaded the checklist, filled it out, you need to save it as the taxpayer's last name, first name, the last 4 digits of their social security number, and then it's going to say 2022 checklist at the end. Leave that there. It's a long name for a document, but it's helpful for us to keep organized. So the next thing is that you want to re-upload this document with the correct name of the document back into the shared folder, into this woman's folder. So all you do is you go and you find it on your on your documents, and I'm just gonna pull up an uncompleted one, and I can always delete it later, but all you need to do is hover over. I'm not sure, can you guys see this, that there's like a icon that I'm hovering over the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you hover over it and then drop it, and then it's going to automatically upload. So now I just uploaded a blank checklist, which I'll delete, but when you guys upload it, you guys should make sure that it's the right one, it's filled out, and it has the right naming convention. So that's how you go and upload the checklist. And if you're not doing the computer input portion and someone else is, then you need to go back and alert. I think Joe Schmo is working on this one. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back into the pairing room or the chat. So I'm just going to go back to Spaces. You can go back into the pairing room, or you can go back into chat and say, okay, I'm going to look for Joe Schmo and let him know I'm done with the interview, and he can start on the computer input. And then you need to alert the assistant manager that you're done, and that Joe Schmo needs access to that Google Drive as well. So again, you can do that in the regular chat, or you can do that in Spaces, or you can even send us an email. The email that we sent to you with the file name. You can always just go back into that email and reply and just, say, hi, Tamara, Joe Schmo needs access to, what's the taxpayer's information, and then we'll go ahead and send it. So, and then once Joe Schmo is finished with his portion, you're back into the tasks tab. Joe Schmo can go ahead and say, okay, I'm done. Click on this checklist here, and it says task completed. And then it enters back into this completed section. And then you're done. The alert has automatically gone in to the assistant manager, and you're ready to start on the next one. So that's the virtual training, and pretty quickly, but if you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me or the other assistant managers, and let us know if you have any questions. And I think that's it. If anybody else wants to chime in on the virtual process, feel free. But that's the nuts and bolts of it.
Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me. It's Emil again. Thank you so much, Tamara, for that very good presentation. Some people in the chat are talking about I don't see the spaces in my email. Again, you should be accessing using your community text a email, and that is the spaces that you see there on the left-hand side. So hopefully when you access your email, you see those spaces that Tamara was talking about. Okay. Some people have talked about preparing returns. We had a discussion about this at CTA. I think as a way of our expressing our thanks and appreciation, in addition to the certificates that you guys are going to be available to receive, you also are allowed to prepare your own tax returns through Community Tax Aid free of charge. So our little thank you for helping us out. But we do this, we say this under these conditions that, of course, you prepare it under our system. In other words, you fill out a checklist on yourself. You meet our guidelines. You provide all the documentation. You, in effect, or someone interviews you. You have someone like myself, a manager or assistant manager, call the information, review the information, review the return. You compare your own return under those guidelines. If you agree with what I just said, that during the tax season, when there's a lull in the action, when it's not as busy, and you have all of your tax documents, we will prepare your return. Okay, so I thank you for that. Hopefully you've heard that. And I thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. I'm looking at the chat once again. Again, this issue with logging in, and I guess that's a question for Tom. We can address that issue, I guess, tomorrow. Answer those questions about logging in. I guess Tom will devote a little bit of time with that, to looking into that. Again, tomorrow is the third of our get-togethers, and this get-together scheduled for tomorrow is not mandatory. So it's up to you. And what we're going to do in tomorrow's session is turn the tables. You're, in effect, going to be in charge of tomorrow's meeting. It is called the volunteer forum. Bring your questions to us about anything you've heard over the last 2 weeks. Questions about training, things about the tax rules that you want to have reinforced. Questions about today's computer class, about navigating and accessing Tax Slayer. Questions about the virtual tax return process. What do you know about it? What would you like to know about it? Your roles, what would you like to do? Other things too of administrative nature. Some of the documents we've been sending you talk about you assigning yourselves to a storefront or to do virtual tax return preparation. Hopefully you guys have made a decision at this point. We need to, more or less at this point, an indication of who's going to be at our storefronts to do face-to-face work, who's going to man the virtual tax return process. Hopefully we have a good mix. It's very important that we have all of our storefronts, both real and virtual, manned by everybody here. So I thank you so much. I think this recording is going to end soon. I'll stay in the chat a little bit. Some of our other CTA managers and experienced volunteers will stay with us too. Thank you so much, guys. Have a very wonderful Saturday. Somehow in the cold, we'll navigate the cold together, but hopefully we'll see you tomorrow at our volunteer forum. Have a very good day, guys. Take care.